in South Baltimore in 1909, and he came to Elkridge as a boy in 1921 and ended up working at the for the B&O Railroad and later for the medical division of the Maryland State Police. Let's see, how are we going to do this? I'll talk loud and I'll give you the mic. Let's see how this works. Okay, Willie, your father was. Can you hear me if I talk without the mic? Yeah. Okay. Your father.
With my big mouth, they can hear.
Oh, that's good. Perfect. Okay. Now, your father was a blacksmith.
That's right.
And he moved the business and the family to Elkridge, and you were a city boy, and you said you thought this place was real country when you moved here. What were your first impressions when you came here?
I wondered where the bathroom was. And then they told me outside. And if it was at night, you lit a lantern and you walked outside. A two-holer.
And where did your family move to? Where did you live?
Well, it was then they called it West Elkridge, but because Hunt Club Road was not there, and that was it. No, nothing. I mentioned one thing though. In going through Elkridge, they passed by Laner's store. And my mother would not go into a new house or a new home or to her unless she had a new broom sweeping. So we had to stop at Laner's and buy a new broom. So we went into an 8-room house, a nice big house, no question about it, on 25 acres of ground.
And where did you go to school?
Elkridge, Elkridge Elementary. And we were taught by the principal. What was her name? Somebody would remember it.
Wasn't Yingling, was it?
Huh?
Wasn't Yingling, was it?
No, it wasn't Yingling.
No.
He was later. Who? Connors, Mrs. Connor. And she taught the 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. And I was in the 6th grade.
Now, you had sort of a traumatic start to school when you first got here.
Yes, I had a very traumatic start in school. I had very thin hair, but then who wants fat hair? So I was taken to the doctor, and they said the only thing that you can do with his hair is shave his head. I don't mean just clip the hair off, I mean shave it. So my father did. He shaved my head. This was about the 15th of August. And school started the day after Labor Day. So I went to school with a bald head. A brand new school. Never saw a pupil in it before in my life. So I was monikered the bald-headed eagle. And I kept that right straight through the school years. Bald-headed eagle.
Now, you worked with your father and you learned the blacksmith trade. What were these work animals? Were they show animals? Were they riding
all
horses?
Kinds. That's when I got kicked, so I quit.
What happened?
Well, I was not allowed to nail the shoes on because that is a possibility of laming the horse. So I would fit the shoe and get it all prepared for my father to nail on. But in the meantime, several times I would be kicked, not too far, maybe 20, 30 feet. I figured that was entirely too hard of work for me. So after about 2 years of it, I quit and got a job at the B&O Railroad. Wonderful job, good pay. I'm telling you, I made $1.85 a day.
Now, while you were still working on the farm, you said you had to get up pretty early and do some chores before school?
Just about 4 o'clock usually got up because I had 3 cows to milk, I had 2 horses to take care of, and a jackass. I think the jackass was me to tell you. And I guess about 1,000 chickens and a few hogs, just farm animals to take care of. then go in and wash up and eat my breakfast.
And it
then
was
go-
just a small breakfast, I understand, right?
Oh yeah, 7 eggs, fried, with some bacon or ham, and some toast. Just a small little.
You just
repast.
mainlined that cholesterol.
That's
Right.
Then I took a couple sandwiches for lunch.
Now you worked for a huckster around here. You want to tell people what that involves? People who
The
don't
huckster?
know. Yeah.
I didn't work for him. I was.
No, you worked as one. Yeah.
I was.
Right. You worked as one.
Oh, that was the most money I ever made in my life. I would go down to the market downtown and buy some groceries and so forth. And that was about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. Bring them home, dress them up a little bit, and then take my car through Catonsville and stop the car, and people would buy the stuff. And the first time I was out there, I made $45. And that, in those days, was a lot of money.
Now you learned something. You learned something about what the housewives wanted or didn't want, like what kind of
Yeah.
beans or.
Well, they didn't want to shell the lima beans, for instance, so I did it for them.
But you charged them.
But I charged them more.
Now, Willie, you had on your farm. You had a pretty smart mule.
I did it. He was smarter than I was, because that mule could tell time. I'd have that mule out there cultivating out in the back field, and at 12 o'clock, that mule wanted to eat. Even if I had one more row to do and I would turn him around in that row, he wouldn't do it. He turned around and headed for the stable. Cultivator, me, everything. And after he ate, perfectly fine. He would come out and finish a row. But he wouldn't do it before. And I could coax him or pull him in. He would tread all over everything. He was a smart mule. Smarter than I was.
Now, one of your other jobs on Friday nights, you had a chicken job, right?
Oh yeah, well my father had a regular route in town on a Saturday, and he would take a box, which he called an ice box, and he would take frying chickens in. Well, it was my job to catch them and kill them and dress them, all except cleaning them. I didn't clean them. My father cleaned them, but I had to take all the feathers off. And when you dress 100 chickens, that's a lot of feathers, believe me. And that's what I had to do on a Friday night. 100 frying chickens. It wasn't too bad. I guess it took me maybe an hour and a half.
Did you just chop their necks off?
Oh, I had chopped the heads off and then dip them in hot water and pull all the feathers off.
And Bill, that smelled so good, didn't it?
Wasn't it wonderful?
Now, you had some interesting stories to tell. Elkridge had its share of bootleggers.
Yeah.
Now, you had. Well, I was going to ask you first of all to tell the story about James and Dr. Brumbaugh.
James had a still out back there, and periodically his wife would turn him in because she got $50 for turning a still in, even though it was her husband. So then the still would be blown up or chopped down, and he would be locked up, and after he got out of jail, he would beat the hell out of her. And then she would come running down to our house. My mother would put her on the bed and then call Dr. Brumbaugh, and he would come up and do whatever he had to do with her bones and scratches and bruises and so forth. And then in a couple of days, she was able to go home. But my mother would keep her then for that time. But Brumbaugh was wonderful.
Now, there was another story about a guy named Heck.
Oh, yeah, he was the other bootlegger. He was across the road from James. He had a still across the road. And he was a real nice bootlegger, and boy, did they make money. I was up there cutting grass one day with a team of horses, and Of course, I knew Heck and all of them. Of course, I'm only 14 years old. And the horses got hot, and so I pulled them under a tree, and I was thirsty, so I went on in the house. I never saw so much money in all my life. There was a wooden table with about 8 men around it counting money in 20s, 50s, and $100 bills, which in those days was eye-popping, you know. And another man brought a bushel basket in of money, greenbacks, and dumped them on the table. This bushel basket was full. How many thousands of dollars? I haven't the slightest idea. I didn't pay any attention. I just got my drink of water and left.
Water?
Water. Yeah. That's an interesting story. You know, my father, when he was 62 years old, had a heart attack, and he was ordered by the doctor to have 2 ounces of whiskey every day. He says, I don't drink whiskey. My father never touched a drop of whiskey up until that time. Then I had to force him to take it. Didn't have to force me.
Well, now, your father was involved in the bootleg business himself.
Oh yeah, he stored the whiskey. He didn't make it, but he did store it. Oh, I remember our house having probably about 150 cases of half-gallon jugs of bootleg whiskey. I know it was half-gallon jugs because I used to color it. You know, bootleg whiskey is white, pure white, just like water. And you have to color it to make it amber. And you color it by burning sugar. And boy, I would tell you, I used to burn sugar like mad and color the whiskey.
Now, there was a close call with the sheriff one time, wasn't there?
Not a close call, no. It was a sheriff who wanted to come in town, and my father was driving this old Ford Model T, and with a blanket across a board on it there for a seat. And the sheriff was out on the road. He wanted to go in town. He was thumbing it. So my father stopped, picked the sheriff up, brought him in town. Then later on, he says, well, they got to talking. He says, well, you know what you were sitting on while you rode in town. He says, you were sitting on a case of whiskey, bootleg whiskey. That's what he was doing. Because my father was carrying it for somewhere, I don't know where, but he was covered the bootleg whiskey with a blanket, and that's what the sheriff was sitting on.
Now, there was another story you had mentioned about teaching the Mersons first aid.
Oh yeah, I used to teach first aid. Well, I did that for about 45 years, and I was on the board of directors in the Elkridge Fire Department at the time, and I was asked to teach the firemen first aid, and which I agreed to do. Well, the Mersons were in the class, which I found out a little bit later, because I would call out each name for a roll call. After a while, I didn't have to bother with that. I'd just say, "Are the Mersons here?" 5. And it was Bill Merson, Sam Merson, Jack Merson. Who else?
Oliver, would
Huh?
Oliver?
I know there was 5 in my class, and I would just say, "All 5 here?" And that was it. But they were a nice group, a grand group of people. Then Bill died, unfortunately.
Well, thanks, Willie.